This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice podcast, your inside connection to outdoor legislation. From the Beltway to policy happening your way, we're covering it all. I'm your host, Fred Bird. Join us as we explore public land access, wildlife and fisheries management, Second Amendment rights, the triumphs that shape our nation, the sports we all love, and the stories that fuel our passion for the great outdoors. This is the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to this week's feature edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. This week, we're talking R3, hot button issue across the country, and how can we get more people involved in the shooting sports? How can we get more people to stay, and how can we get people to come back to it that previously did so? We're going to bring in a three-panel guest here. I had these conversations at different parts, but wanted to bring you different levels of folks involved in R3. So we welcome in from Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports, the Director of Ops there, Taniya Bethke, will join us. We go to Pennsylvania Game Commission, Courtney Braunns, who is a practitioner of R3 there in one of the largest hunting states. I think maybe number 2, Governor Shapiro said at his Sunday hunting signing ceremony. We bring in Courtney to talk about what's happening on the ground, for an example of how the state agency there in Pennsylvania is working to solve those looming questions, the problem of reactivating, retention, and recruiting, and some of the ideas that they have. And then finally, I welcome in a local celebrity here. I won't even say local at this point, national celebrity. He does so much with his radio show. Greg Kretschmar of Greg and the Morning Buzz, based out of here in New Hampshire, but they hit millions of people in our region here. Huge swath of different opinions and demographics. Very popular show that is from the 5:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. time slot on the weekdays. And they, Greg and his team, they hit so many ears and really influential. Plus, aside from the terrestrial radio, the streaming platforms that people get to listen to them throughout the country and the world, truly. So I wanted to have Greg on because he gets to hear it all and see it all. He's been at this for 35 plus years, talk to the who's who of Hollywood and rock and roll, right? I mean, anyone you could throw a dart at on a map, they'd probably talk to, right? But also has this background and appreciation for the outdoors, hunting and shooting sports. He is a recreational shooter. His family, he did grow up in a hunting family, but does not hunt, but is a professional photographer, so appreciates that. I also wanted to have Greg in to talk about, because of that 35 years of experience in communications and seeing, hearing it all for, all those years, I want to get a pulse on it. What what is it that we as a community may get wrong? What can we do to improve? We often hear from ourselves on this show, and we don't really often get to have the opportunity to hear from folks in that 80% that we're always talking about. So with Greg coming on again, I just wanted to hear from folks in that 80% that we're always talking about. If there is anything to critique on, you'll hear I acknowledge that I do, and others, we're really hypercritical of our own, and that's because we care about how we're represented. So we kind of talk about that, and then also the other big reason I invited Greg on is his show does this segment about every month and a half or so, where they invite a conservation officer in to their radio show from New Hampshire Fish and Game, and they do this whole Q&A. Folks text, call in, ask all these questions. What I've noticed over the years as a listener, and also working with them, is that there's a genuine interest in our community and what we do. Now they get to ask the the black and white of the conservation officers. What can I do? What can I do? What are the seasons? But then there's other questions about what do I do with this, or what if I have an encounter with this animal, or where can I go to shoot or sight in a gun? Like I've heard all these questions. So it's not necessarily a segment that I think is really targeted at our community, more so the general public that has an interest in what we do and wants to probably get involved. So that model I think is incredibly powerful and one that probably could be replicated and should be replicated if there's other programs out there that are as creative as Greg is and can recognize the value in that. And there's plenty of states in this country that have deep rooted traditions in the shooting sports and hunting and angling that this could work out for. So anyway, I don't want to give too much of the show away. You're going to listen here in a little bit, but that's it. We're going to tee up Taniya first. We'll get to Courtney and then we'll welcome in Greg Kretschmar. All that and much, much more. Let's go. All right. It's my pleasure to welcome in Taniya Bethke, folks, the director of operations at CASH. That is the Council to Advance Hunting and the Shooting Sports. Taniya, welcome. Thanks for carving out the time.
Good morning, friend. I'm glad to be here.
No, we're happy to have you. You and I got to meet a couple times this spring already between NEAFWA and then you guys hosted the National R3 Symposium in Portland, Maine. And you and I had a couple real nice sidebar conversations, so much that I wanted to do a dedicated show um, concerning R3. We use it so much in the testimony that our state program team, that our folks on the Hill use when we go to
Right.
testify on the sporting issues, when we write and submit testimony, that, for the legislators that tune in, for other folks, I thought it was important to really kind of break this down instead of it just being a cool catchphrase that's been out there, R3. And, we sounded out what it means but, really dive into the motivations, what you do there at the council, why the council was formed, and when it was formed. So let's go through the start, and then we can start rolling through some of the more details stuff.
Great. Well, thanks again for having me on. And, in my position with the council, I really get to enjoy supporting archery practitioners across the country. And these are folks that are really supporting everybody out in the field trying to enjoy our natural resources. Um, so I'm really passionate about what we do. It's a really important component of the lifestyle and the way that we get to live and appreciate wild spaces and wild things. The council was created in response to a White House initiative in 2009 that recognized the decline in hunting participation. We wanted to make sure we were addressing hunting and shooting sports in a very intentional way. So our organization was formed and was heavily involved in creating some of the first best practices for supporting hunting and shooting sports participants across the country. Our main call is not only to increase participation in those activities by addressing specific barriers and then training up practitioners and how to do those things, but also increasing public support for hunting and shooting sports. These things are hard to happen in a country if the support for those activities by non participants is really low. So we go to work on those two things: participation and public support.
And I think that's tees up and where I kind of wanted to go with the conversation is that public support. Now it was presented there in Portland, and it's been talked about over the last couple of years, but to us, to our community, a significant downturn. Now, that is to say, back in 2021, I think it was a high of 81% of the general population either approved of or were indifferent to hunting and the shooting sports specifically. Now, a few years that has dropped to 73%. Again, that's a great number, all things considered, but kind of the way our friend Mark Duda puts it, kind of an alarming downturn. And why that is, so I know they responsive management. We had Mark on earlier in the year talking about this, and you guys getting into this. And I think what's important what you guys do, working with the practitioners, the state agencies, is the messaging and the motivation, right? So some of this stuff bore out that for the most part, people are really cool with people going out and sourcing their own protein. Like they dig that. That's cool. The locavore movement. still very relevant in what we do, and generally people are just okay with that. They're really good with that. It's when we start getting into this minutia of people's overseas really, or what they end up, people using vernacular like trophy. As soon as you say trophy, people in that squishy 80 start taking a pretty negative approach to their approval of it. I find it interesting that these are all one and the same, but you start using playing semantics with this stuff, and perception is totally changed. What are you guys doing and helping your folks in the field or at the professionals on the ground in their given states, as well as, working with the NGOs and everyone kind of coming together as a community, getting the messaging, I don't want to say right, but well, right. Get it so that people will take it, digest it, and be good with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question and a great lead up. But the first thing I want to point to is like it's really easy to catastrophize like a drop since 2021. But I want to point to one major significant societal thing that we're all addressing right now. During COVID, people were worried about food supply. People were concerned that they were not going to be able to get meat at the supermarket. And some
Mhm.
people weren't, right? And so in 2021, we saw this major push of people understanding the importance that hunting plays and sustainability. So all of a sudden, outdoor wildlife, so locally sourced protein became really important, really relevant to people immediately. So of course there was a peak in support at that time when people realized the necessity for these things. And of course there's a decline since then as food security has increased, right? So it's easy to catastrophize like an overall like 3-year drop in support and approval, but we're right now at pre-COVID levels of support for hunting and shooting sports participation that are illegal. But is it important for us to pay attention to that relevancy that we have in the broader public? Absolutely. Yes, of course. What we are seeing that's also happening, we've got a whole generation of folks. You've got peak 65 happened last year, and that's the most number of people to reach the age of 65, and the baby boomer generation reached the age of 65 last year. So this is having a major societal impact across the whole country. These are folks that are more likely to grow up hunting, more likely to grow up around firearms. And these are folks that are now exiting the workforce. They're taking that relevancy with them. And we have other generations that didn't grow up around those activities coming up and stepping into positions of power and influence and voice across our whole country. And what our community predominantly has done in the past has resonated with those baby boomers that are aging out. And we have not yet picked up on what's going to resonate well with these younger audiences. What values do they have that hit close to home with what is really important in the conservation community? And so we're still learning that. I still see like what the hunting population is maybe 5% of the country, right? And yet every conversation I ever have about what matters to the other 95% of the population of our country always comes as a surprise in the conservation community. What do you mean they don't understand that we have this really powerful emotional relationship with wildlife and wild spaces? What do you mean the broader community that we talk to doesn't understand that my relationship with firearms is a respectful, safe, education based relationship? There's always this sense of surprise. But when we talk about how we're telling our stories, the 5% of us with not very many stories, the loudest of our stories are not communicating to that 95% of the rest of the country what is important and valuable and relevant across all of us. And so that's what the research is based on now. Perceptions, what's driving perceptions? What's generationally relevant now that wasn't just a few years ago? What matters to people and how are we finding that common ground? You've got this like very proud community of people that has paid for conservation for a lot of years. Very proud. And shifting how we tell that story feels very personal, but it's going to be necessary for the success of what we do.
Well, and as this audience hears me, probably every episode this works its way in, and very organically. I don't look to ad place it at all, but it just comes up. Is that story of conservation funding, the initial conversations that almost 90 years ago occurred, established itself in Pittman and Robinson in 1937, and we've moved on and come so far with it, and I often blame our own. It's not just public ignorance, not by any fault of their own. It's ours. We do a terrible job and have done a terrible job for years of championing that and really planting our flag. And it's not to brag, it's just say, this is how this works. This is how we are the envy of the entire planet, and we set the standard for wildlife management and who pays. It's not like, oh, we pay for it so we get to use it. It's just the truth. We like we're gonna put this on our back as a community. And again, the audience knows this, being outright transparent. It is the shooting sports, the recreational shooting sports that carries the load. I know for a number of years, especially when I was coming up through, hunters were real proud about beating their chest. Hunters make the way and we do all this. Well, you contribute to it, but not in the sense that you think. Um, it's not enough to just buy a hunting license, although that is true because of that federal match. It's our shooting recreational shooting folks that are out there, and I wonder how many of them actually even know they contribute to this system, and we're glad they do. We want them to keep shooting. That's why it's important to have public ranges and access for these things, to go out and do.
Yeah. I mean, it's 3 out of every 4 conservation dollars are contributed by recreational target shooting, right? By ammunition that is not related to or spent on hunting. That's not to say that hunters aren't an essential and really important component to this, and they're some of the best storytellers we've got on the landscape. But who's contributing to conservation is a much bigger picture than we ever thought before, right? The folks that are paying in is a much bigger and broader picture. And let's be honest, firearms are a nuanced topic. Target shooting is a nuanced topic, and it's one that we haven't really dove into. I'm like, "Well, how do we talk about this with people that care about conservation and wildlife and wild spaces?"
Yeah, I how do you? Where you have, man, I dare say in the last 30 years, you've had nothing but mass media, legacy media, and then now with, the advent of social media going back 17, 19 years and where it's evolved, without having stats in front of me, I just feel anecdotally there's a heavier negative representation of it in media than there is the positives, and just talking about it like you would talk about baseball. It's going out and shooting targets, shooting metal, skeeting and clays and competitive sport shooting. I mean, hell, it's in the Olympics. There are Olympic events scheduled around professional and competitive shooting. So, why is it cool in something like that versus just everyday, high school kids going out there and shooting and whatever, if you're three gun or not. But like, I'm building this all up. Basically, the whole point is like there's just been this negative connotation associated with it and this taboo set up around it. Where to your point, the 65 age demo and above, like these guys were riding around with shotguns and 22s in their back windshield of their truck, and they go hunting after school, squirrel hunting or deer hunting. And that was very
Right.
much part of culture.
Well, think about again the societal things we're talking about right now, right? So, like as of 2020, folks under the age of 19 were minority white. So, the majority of folks in that age demographic were increasingly black and brown. And as our society progresses, US Census tells us we're going to have more black and brown folks that are coming up through more generations and becoming minority white in our country until 2045. We've got a tipping point. So, what you just talked about, the people, a lot of the folks that just grew up with this as part of their heritage and their culture, those stories aren't resonating with a lot of the folks that are coming up now behind them, right? They're not seeing themselves represented. What they are seeing represented are values that don't make sense, right? And don't make sense societally to 95% of the folks out there that are looking around and saying, well, I didn't grow up on a farm. I didn't grow up around firearms. But what I have seen are a bunch of movies that reiterate some really negative stereotypes about what firearm ownership means or a kind of people who hunt, right? Like we've had some really negative perceptions that we have not addressed or distanced ourselves from appropriately. If we're going to reassure the general public that what we do is safe and responsible and in the care and stewardship of wildlife and wild spaces. Like we need to be beating our chests about the importance of firearm safety, right? So, like, you and I have talked about getting programs out into schools so that when kids go over to a friend's house, because we know 50% of households in our country have firearms, that they're safe, right? That you don't have to worry that they're going to be curious in a way that's dangerous, right? Like, you need to address safety in those ways. And people need to understand the relevance of wildlife. I think about this every single time I'm in a big city. And I used to live in Dallas, right? So I'd be getting ready to get on public transportation. I'd be thinking about somebody standing right next to me. Like, why the hell would they care? This person right next to me. Why would they care about a forest? Why would they care about a deer or a turkey or CWD? What matters to this person right next to me that's never left this community or has spent much time out in the woods, right? And ask yourself that question all the time and think about how we tell our stories on the radio, in books, in articles, and whether that even matters to this person next to me. So those are the conversations I try to have all the time before even engaging in public
And
perceptions communication at all. Why should this matter to the person next to me? Not our community. We're really great at talking to
yeah,
ourselves.
sure.
We're really great at working in an echo chamber.
Yeah, no doubt. And, when you think about that, another level deeper is, okay, if I had a conversation with that person, how would I how would I represent just not just myself, but the community as a whole? Because once you engage in that kind of event, you've become a de facto ambassador for the rest of for all of us, for that single person, their perception. So, you think back to, the 1940s or maybe even late 30s when, Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny became a thing. Like that meme, the Fudd meme has carried through almost older than Pittman Robinson, right? And we say that, like, stop being a Fudd, don't be a Fudd on social media and how you talk about things. If it's brown, it's down. Like this is stupid things to say. But we do, and we're constantly stepping on our own feet on this stuff. It reminds me of a time when I was up at the New Hampshire legislature, well before I had this position, and there was some very contentious legislation being presented. I think most of it was a trapping ban, and then it got into coyote hunting, and all this craziness. And I sat down, and not knowing who I sat down next to in the chamber for public comment, and the lady was a complete anti trapper, anti all of it, and she deduced that I was not on her side, so we started having a polite conversation. I knew I wasn't gonna change her mind, but what I got through to her was like, "Listen, we are like 90% lockstep. We want healthy forests, we want healthy habitats, we want clean water, clean air, we want the critters to be on the landscape in an abundance. It's just and you wanna watch them, I wanna watch them, but how you consume them and how I consume them, that's the next step. You stop at that, and I see conservation, true conservation for what it is, because we know that that term has been bastardized. It's been co-opted by the antis and reframed as actual preservation, but the sheepskin of conservation put over it, right? So people on that other side run with this. Well, it's conservation, and no, it's not. What you're representing is preservation. Now, again, when I finished this conversation, I didn't change her mind, but I think having a polite interaction with somebody that she just thought was gonna be a complete FUD, I was like, "Well, you don't have to go out and do this," but I do, and it's because of the proper management and the conservation-minded management of these species that we are able to go out there and do this. Again, I'm not asking you to come do it. I'm also asking you not to stop me from being able to do it.
Right? I'll tell you right now, I want hashtag don't be a FUD all over everything I
Make it
own.
a T-shirt.
But, listen, I didn't start hunting till I was 33, right? Like, I didn't grow up hunting. I did grow up around firearms, so I didn't have as many barriers as other people do experience when they're growing up. But, I had a lot of privilege in that way. But I didn't learn to hunt until I was 33. And it wasn't until I saw deer starving to death in the wintertime that it really clicked for me, where I thought, ooh, I care about wildlife. And if I say I'm going to care about wildlife, I care about healthy wildlife. And humans play such an important role in maintaining healthy wildlife. I get asked the question all the time, well, why don't we just leave the wildlife alone? They'll figure it out. I said, yeah, they'll figure it out. It'll be brutal and it will be awful. And many animals will die of starvation and many diseases will spread rapidly before any kind of balance is found. And a lot of people will be harmed through vehicle wrecks, because populations will get out of control. We play such an important role in healthy wildlife, and that's not a story that's told very often or loudly. And so when I was in South Dakota and I saw deers yarded up and I saw CWD wasting away members of that population as we were getting a handle as a state on how to manage CWD, um, I was heartbroken and I thought, okay, yeah, I get it. I understand the stewardship thing that people have to be a part of. As soon as we became part of the system, it's now our responsibility to maintain that system. And I wish more of the public could understand that education was more readily available to folks that didn't go to school for conservation biology like I did, or that many of our biologists do that manage the system, right?
So, a couple pins there I want to unpack. So, the part about our role in that, being part of the North American model of wildlife management, the 7 pillars, that hunting is one of those pillars, and we are the preferred method for wildlife management. But that in and of itself is important. But I think the next piece of that is reminding folks, like the ones you said, that, well, why don't we just let nature take care of itself? Their idea of that utopia does not exist. It cannot. It's impossible to exist. They are going back to a pre-colonial or colonial mindset that, the bison ran everywhere in the West and the Great Plains, and this again, all this wonderful postcard type thinking, which is great. Unfortunately, for those critters, there are 335 million people roughly in CONUS, 48 lower states, right? And then go up into Canada, the entire border is completely populated. Again, southern border, blah, 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 with all, I hate blah, blah, blah. I can't believe I just did that. But you have these migratory species
Be
that don't,
odd, okay?
yeah, that don't know political boundaries, right? So what I'm saying is we are so fragmented. The landscape is so changed. You can never achieve this Norman Rockwell-esque idea of animals just running abundantly to and fro, managing themselves. We see this with predator reintroduction in Colorado with wolves. That is not a system that can be maintained. You don't have the places for the large ungulates to run. You have domesticated critters on the landscape that now create human interest conflict with these wild species. So again, I'm building this big picture to say it can't happen. No matter how much you want it, it will never happen again, because until, we as a species go extinct, when and if that ever happens, it's gonna be a hell of a lot longer from when I'm on this earth. So, eh, all these great ideas, are gonna get pushed many centuries from now, and you can't operate like that. It's just not a viable argument to be made.
Yeah. I think, we can't force feed people fundamental ecological lessons, right? Like, the general public isn't going through 4 years of college understanding what carrying capacity means, right? Like, it's not a concept, it's abstract for a lot of folks, right? If you've never been outside of or if you've never been out to wild spaces to see what those systems look like or what those spaces are like, it's easy to, imagine something totally different. And what we've been, exposed to through media controls a lot of those perceptions. But I think, again, whose responsibility is that though? That's our responsibility to tell meaningful stories and in a way that people want to consume it. But if you've only ever watched Bambi, for example,
Mhm.
or movies where firearm ownership is something related to violence instead of responsible, safe, you know, tools that we use. Like I've got a shotgun named Vera and we go for long walks and sometimes we harvest a bird that I come home with and I feed my family with, right? Like that story is not being told in any movies I've ever seen in my entire life, right? So what are we doing about that? I think that's the thing. And I will tell you, those perceptions are being addressed by state fish and wildlife agencies all over the place. There are wildlife councils that states are convening that are pulling in the general public to have influence on what works and what doesn't. I've seen marketing campaigns that are polling the general public on whether audiences are being receptive to specific messaging and whether messaging is being effective on helping them understand systems better. But if all we're doing is talking at a brick wall and we're not evaluating if it's being effective or not, and whether that information is penetrating the general public in a way they want to consume it, not in the way we want to consume it, then if we're not measuring those things, we're not being effective. So those are the practices I do see happening on the landscape. I see smart objectives. I see evaluation. I see meaningful marketing starting to happen. I think just like the Got Milk campaign told everybody about the importance of calcium in cow's milk, I think we're moving towards people being very intentional with creating campaigns that reach broader audiences with easy to access messaging.
So, I wanted to go and pivot, not to pivot, not a hard pivot, about the hunter ed that supports what you're talking about, hunter ed in schools. But before we do that, you mentioned wildlife councils, which we have two active wildlife councils in the country, in Colorado and Michigan being the other. I should know this. It's only two. Um, and trying to explain to people the importance of wildlife councils and what they can do, I think people hear that term. And again, this is about our storytelling and being purposeful in how we present this stuff. It's not an advocacy group of a bunch of mom and pop brick and mortars coming together with nonprofits and the state agency to promote our interests. Wildlife councils is a state agency getting dedicated funds to employ an outside resource to market directly to the 80%. We're not, it's got nothing to do with the echo chamber you reference. If it's doing itself right, should never see most of these advertisements or any of this messaging because we're not the target demo. And some people's aversion to that is okay. So how do we pay for it? I think Colorado did a $1 bump on their licenses. Um, some states, and I've talked about this, my home state, you put a $1 bump on a license, people come unhinged, and it's really not a lot. Like, if we're telling our own, like, "Listen, it's a dollar bump. It's going into this dedicated fund not to be used for anything else other than creating, an opportunity for public perception to either be, A, accepting of us, or B, which I'm totally cool with, just staying indifferent. I'm okay with people being indifferent to what I do. Just mind your business, me mind my business, and just not getting in our way or advocating for anything that creates access denial. Of course, we wanna see more people, and we can talk about that, but wildlife councils are extremely, important. It's not for every state agency. Maine is a good example. They have their own internal thing, and they've been pretty successful at it. So, again, the model is there, but I think most states would benefit from that. Any thoughts?
Yeah. I just think good relationship development with a broad public and community that you serve is important no matter how you want to do it. Whether it's through a wildlife council or whether you're just having good conversations and public meetings. Like I think the key thing is relationship development with people that don't think like you and don't believe the same thing you do and understanding what values are at play on the landscape, whatever mechanism you have to do so. If you put your earmuffs on and you're only talking to your neighbors that do and think the same way you do, you're screwing yourself.
Mhm.
You're screwing yourself right out of successful and effective management strategies that are inclusive of the whole public that you serve. So the relationship development piece is unbelievably valuable for everybody on the landscape. I'll say that I think the piece that you were just talking about right there with marketing campaigns, where I see a lot of that funded isn't necessarily state by state bumping up sales tax. I see a lot of regional campaigns that are funded by multi-state conservation grant dollars that's coming out of Pittman Robertson, right? And that's the excise tax on manufacturing of firearms and ammunition.
Mhm.
And so a lot of that's going towards some of it's public support, some of it's participation style marketing where you're trying to get more people to do the thing. But what's really interesting, and you hit on it, was attitude study. We're really lucky. The downturn that we've seen since 2021 and the attitudes towards legal hunting and shooting sports has not been from high support to anti. The slide has been from high support to neutral. It's super easy to get somebody back from neutral to supportive, and we've got this window of time to do that in. So if ever there was a time to emphasize the importance of good communication, good relationship development, good partnerships that reach broader audiences, right now is that time. We have a chance to pivot back towards high support.
So, that in mind, I wanna turn now to hunter ed in the school as an initial touch point. Obviously, for us, and then you and I talked about this, this is a priority piece of policy for us at Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, working to work with legislators to find some way to have a touch point with the kids. Now, as recently as last year, I got to touch base with our talent on the ground there in Michigan, um, Bob Matthews, but Michigan introduced 2 bills, a House bill and Senate bill, that would require that, there's a model hunter safety course to be created for schools to offer as an elective, which I think is great. I like the idea of not as far as a selling point, not force feeding it. Now, I'm gonna back that up and contradict myself saying, I think personally it needs to be a touch point for all the kids, if nothing else, to understand how the 2 models, how the North American model works and how conservation funding works. And I think a good place for it is in physical science where they get that in, like, what, 8th, ninth grade. These kids are getting it. They're old enough and their gray matter, I think, is mature enough to start putting those pieces together. And that's a story no one's being, exposed to until they come into the given sport of hunting or recreational shooting, if at all. And that's normally facilitated by the state agency, again, if they're doing it. So, I think the physical science is where again, this is my personal thought, is where you can get, at least public school wise, you can get the majority of these kids, and you at least, if nothing else, it's something that ends up sitting in the back of their mind, and they've at least heard the terms and been exposed to it.
Well, we were just talking about how, like, once somebody graduates high school, there's no concentrated way to communicate ecological concepts. Like, there's no force feeding anybody anything. And you don't want to force feed people. You want it to be accessible in a way that people enjoy and understand and want to engage in. I think school is a unique opportunity for that, right? And it's tied to the rest of the systems is to be a high school biology teacher. Before that, I was an environmental studies teacher in middle school and I was down in Texas. And I loved nothing more than seeing lights go off when you talk about how we fit as human beings into this bigger system, right? And then seeing students feel connected to something bigger than themselves for the first time in fifth grade, really connected with people, right? And then they start understanding, like, oh, okay, that's why I turn the water off when I'm brushing my teeth. I get it. That's why I don't throw stuff on the ground and litter, right? Because this matters. These things are important. And that's that foundational understanding that starts to permeate people's understanding, lays a really important foundation for a relationship with wild spaces. It starts there, young, right? So by the time we're talking about they're coming into classes, they've got this understanding of themselves in the system, you've got a really small window of time to say, and when you are a voting American in this country, here's how we pay for these things. These would be activities that are important for those wild animals you care about. You have a really finite window of time to make those two things make sense so that they have a lasting impact on how adults are making decisions in our country. You get you get all of that in your civics classes. You understand how our government works. You get that in civics. You get that in our social ed class, at least to a certain degree.
Yeah.
You understand life sciences to a certain degree through facts. Like you start understanding yourself in your life and how to have good skills in your own life. But we're missing this piece about how you are a steward of wildlife and wild spaces.
Yeah, and I would guess in some geographical areas of the country where, these roots aren't that deep, um, and especially in these urban environments where it's just not in their face. And I'm looking out my house right now, and it's nothing but green forest. I had a whole, group of poults and, 2 hen turkeys come through the yard this morning while I was reading. I got listening to them kiki, and it was like, it's the most wonderful, beautiful thing, and I take that for granted because I see it. Well, I don't, but in a way, it becomes just what I'm into. But, you get in these urban settings, and it's not there. So it doesn't occur, I think, to folks to even make it a part of a curriculum like you're talking about, and 'cause there's no physical association. It becomes an abstract thought in the black and white text or however they're receiving this. I think it's easier for people outside of an urban environment to get that, which leads me to my next piece, and I think we're gonna run a little long, so if you need to stop, let me know. I wanna be respectful of your time, but these are important points I wanna get to. Is the R3 community the heavy focus on urban environments? And doing just that, exposing, giving them the opportunity, different target demos. I hate the term non-traditional, um, because at some point in history, we all did this. You look at the physical makeup of our bodies, our teeth, like we were all hunter gatherers at some point, and probably in the last century and a half is where you really started having these turns with technology. And you look at World War II and the development of flash freezing and refrigerators. Now all of a sudden that's in everyone's accessible in everyone's house or apartment, and like the forcing of outdoor forage and all that. Like it's the technological advances create this less need to go out, right? So now you have this term of non-traditional hunters, and most of them are centered in city centers, and most of them, like you said, are brown or black. Which and me and my buddy Darrell Smith, Sport and Life Notebook, go around about this for a couple of years now, and we both agree. Like you talk to folks that are of African descent, like yo, that that is not that far removed. That you are not non-traditional. Like your lineage, and hell, even like to the the southern states, there are deep rooted folks with that lineage, with that heritage that have been doing this for hundreds and thousands of years. So they're, again, you're going back 60, 80 years, making them non traditional, but they're not. So we deal with what we got, but I know I just said a lot. Unpack some of that and then get to the heart of why the urban environment and the demos that are there are important for this movement and are important to keeping things going.
I mean, if you think about the people that are making decisions in our country, it's not our rural America. There's not a high enough concentration of people in
Great
rural
point.
America to make major political movement. And so if you want to have a bunch of advocates who understand what you do or support what you do or participate in activities they want to participate in with representation, they can see themselves represented in these activities. They can see stories that represent them, women and people of color and people of all ages participating in outdoor spaces. They can see representation. If you want that to happen, that means a shift in our community. And it means us being okay with telling those stories and sharing that space and making sure that we're building advocacy intentionally. And that means focusing on urban centers. That means focusing on where the people are. And it also means focusing on where our relevancy isn't.
Mm, that's interesting. Uh, Thinking about what Jarrell and and Jarrell's other organizations, Minority Sportsmen's Alliance, he and his wife Ashley started some years back.
Yeah, Minority Outdoor Alliance is a phenomenal organization. He and Ashley have been reaching broader audiences for a long time and developing innovative
Hmm.
partnerships. I think if you want to talk about like where we need to go right now, one is supporting participants with social support, making sure they feel represented, heard, and belonging immediately. And that belonging has been lacking for some time, again, because people aren't seeing themselves represented in our community right now, regardless of history and the fact that we all started as hunting and gathering communities with deep cultural roots tied to these activities. Where we are today is a lack of representation and storytelling for many people in our communities. And so supporting through social support those folks is one essential step. The other thing is partnerships. We can't do all of these things. State fish and wildlife agencies can't do all of these things, nor are they relevant with many of the audiences that are deserving of and needing support in community outreach. And so, leveraging meaningful partnerships, developing meaningful relationships with people that are bridge builders is the second step. There are folks that are going to be able to make other folks feel heard and belong faster than anything. And so they need to be your best friends, making good relationships that matter so that we can further reach is the other key piece here. Scalability through partnership.
What's the challenge? Now, I got a buddy in Cliff Cadet out of Queens, urban archer, and he was featured with NWTF and did some partnership with them. They did a whole write up on him probably 3, 4 years ago. And the whole point to the write up was him being there in one of the 5 boroughs and then wanting to go archery hunt and turkey hunt. So the guy gets on the metro, all camo clad with a archery gear, trying to get out of the city to get to a place of public land where he can go turkey hunt. But everything in between that is this social challenge, right? Like, one, here's this dude dressed in camo with a weapon amongst all these New York City inhabitants on the metro. Like, what is this dude up to? And then for him to physically get out of the city, which I think was like a 40 or 45-minute trek just on the subway, and then getting to these public places to get out there and do that. I'm not asking you to solve the world's problems here, but like how that's got to be a challenge for you all when you're doing this messaging, you're trying to get people involved, is physically getting them out of their 15-minute city, these concrete jungles, to a wild place to participate.
So all R free is like there's no like one stop shop for what specific initiative I think everybody needs to do. But the concept of R3 is not a program, it's a business practice. And the business practice is looking at comprehensive customer engagement strategies. When you look at your whole customer journey, if the bulk of your people are having to get on a freaking subway to get all the way out of the city and it's taking them an hour and a half to get to wild spaces, that's a freaking barrier. And your system should take a look at that barrier as an issue. That's not the same barrier in every system. Other systems are going to say, you know what? There's a price point here that's a major issue for a huge bulk of the people who want to do this thing. Let's look at that barrier. Other people are going to say, oh, Man, um, Pennsylvania just looked at Sunday hunting and they said, this is a major barrier of participation. R3 says we need to take a look at this customer journey and figure out how we can address that big barrier. For some people, it's not seeing other people that represent them. Man, when I went to my first shooting range, I was on high alert.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because of anything negative that happened. It was that I felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. And now I've gotten much more comfortable with that. I have a community of people I trust and feel safe with, and it's not an issue. But there are those perception barriers that also exist in our community. There's perceptions around safety. So, whatever's going on in your system, R3, the business practice of R3 is saying, okay, what barriers exist for your customers or participants in this system? And how can we address those barriers? So, I think you're pointing out some really important ones. Access is a huge barrier. If people can't get to the place to do the thing, that's a barrier. Let's talk about what that looks like in one system.
Now, in that one example I gave out of New York City, not hunting specific, but what Cliff dialed in was because of that access, especially where he's focused on kids getting out. Well, there were plenty of fishing opportunities right in the city, and we need to say that fishing also contributes to this funding model via Dingle Johnson, and we're celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Sport Fish Restoration Act this year. So, what always gets kind of focused when we're having these R3 conversations is hunting and shooting sports, and for the right reasons. I think sometimes fishing gets overlooked, and that's such an easy way to get young people, at least outside, for that first initial immersion, and what can be fun, and just just getting outside and in a city setup where you do have fresh water systems. And, in New York, you have a salt and brackish area, you go striper fishing or whatever it is from shore. Like that's pretty accessible and in a low cost entry.
Mhm. Any outlet you can have to develop relationships with wild spaces is
Yeah.
clutch. You can go to a city park, like how you and I define wilderness
Mm,
has like solitude built into it. It got this idea that like to be wild spaces has to be really far away and quiet and distant. No one else is there. That's not true for everybody. You can develop a meaningful relationship at the local pond, like you just talked
mhm,
about, at the stream that flows through your backyard, at a city park, right? Whatever that piece is essential, but absolutely do not undermine the importance of archery
mhm,
as an endpoint, of fishing as an endpoint, of urban trapping. I have friends that have gotten involved in these activities through urban trapping programs, and it's amazing the kind of access that they've gotten in their own backyards to harvesting squirrels and those kinds of things. So I just think there's some innovative ways where we can meet people where they are and address the barriers that they're experiencing and making damn sure that they're exposed to a lot of different kinds of relationship development with wild spaces and the activities that we care about.
yeah, that's awesome. I love hearing about the urban trap and stuff because there's plenty of it that should be going on that's helpful as wild populations of raccoon, skunk, possum, coyotes, are finding not eking, they're making a good living out of the spoils of urban life fare. Like they don't have to try very hard and they're doing very well. So that wildlife needs to be managed as well in your brownstone neighborhoods and your high rise neighborhoods. These critters exist, and I love that idea. It's fantastic. All right, so I don't want to end the show or this conversation on a negative tone, but I do have to address. So we've talked about funding a lot, and one of the knocks that we get when we're talking about hunter recruitment is some people think it's just a money grab. We just want more people spending money on licenses, and just it's a business thing, and we just need to make people rich. Now, I would say a part of that, if we're being honest, we do need more people to purchase those licenses because of the 3-to-1 match. We also want more people getting into the shooting sports because of that match, because that's how this whole operation is funded and works. I would stop at that because the whole point is that this is not a money grab. And I think for people to say that is disingenuous. Your thoughts?
Listen, if this is a money grab, there are significantly more effective ways to smack than trying to like get 5% of the population to pay for things. Oh, what I would say is hunting and shooting sports play a significantly bigger role than all that. All that, right? Hunting's been around since the dawn of people. And so, as a lifestyle, ensuring that people can harvest locally sourced protein hasn't been through the industrial agriculture system, and people that want to have that lifestyle, let's make sure that that's freedom that they can access. If people want to have a spiritual connection with the food that they eat, let's make sure that that access is available for them. If people are interested in protecting their homes and property through making sure they can safely handle a firearm, because we know 50% of households have one, then let's make damn sure people have access to a location where they can safely learn how to do
Mhm.
that. That's what this is about, is making sure and protecting the lifestyles and abilities and access of people who choose to live their lives this way and who want to have that deeper connection to the activities that they have. Our job is to support them in doing so.
Absolutely. The other part of this sentiment, this anti-R3 sentiment comes at access. There's a very small but very loud minority within our community that is opposed to our efforts of bringing more people into the fold and being involved because now they say, and I think this is mostly a Western states sentiment, but public land, public access is being crowded, and they no longer have these spaces to themselves. And I think it's weird that some of these folks have this idea that these public lands that they always advocate for, we just went through this whole reconciliation process and stripping that out of that big beautiful bill, thankfully so, but these people go out in public and they think it's all theirs, and they don't want anyone else out there, and it's like, you can't have it both ways, and you can't say that, bringing more folks, into the fold is a negative, and it quite frankly, the argument is a selfish one.
I mean, again, public land belongs to everybody. Access is an issue. We want to make sure people have access to wild spaces. We know that the number of people who are relying on public land is increasing as we go through generational transfer of private land. That's increasing in privatization, right? So I understand access is an issue. And when you look at societally what's happening and generationally what's happening, we have declining populations participating in these activities. So if you want your precious activities to continue for you and your children and their children, then you better make sure that we are getting more people who care about what we do involved. You better make sure that these activities are relevant to the broader public and that we have folks who want to participate in these activities. Because if it's left up, like if what we were doing to, just get our kids involved or just get our neighbors' kids involved. If what we were doing already was working, we wouldn't have these conversations. R3 wouldn't be a thing. South Dakota wouldn't have experienced a 50% decline in waterfowl hunters in the last 20
Right.
years. And so, like, you want to talk about competition on the landscape? Well, let's talk about rapid declining participation in the activities we care about and how we're going to build enough social capital about the support of those activities to make sure they continue.
Yeah, and
That's the thing that matters most to me.
when less than half the states in our country have a constitutional, right to hunt and fish in their state constitution, because this isn't, you don't have a federal, constitutional, right to hunt and fish. It remains a majority a privilege, and if not enough people have skin in the game, and not enough people aren't participating, and you get enough loud mouths to go up to a legislature and say, "We don't want this," and no one's there to fight back, it can go away. It can go away pretty damn quick, and it starts with, folks like the trappers and the houndsmen and, people our community. And when I say our people don't always rally to the call, because it doesn't directly affect them. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if the trappers, get maligned and go away, if the houndsmen get maligned and go away, rest assured, they are coming for your archery setups. They, for sure, anything with a firearm, but no one is immune from this. And again, without having people to advocate, without participation, we lose our voice. And, without having that constitutional backbone, you're screwed.
And I'll tell you one thing, are these conversations where we're talking about us versus them, it definitely has a way of dividing our community, the conservation community even. You got folks in the conservation community that are us versus theming each other all over R3 right
All
now, and I think that's bogus.
Mhm.
Because, like, the pathway forward isn't who's right and who's wrong. It's not if we're right and they're wrong, us and them. It's how we collectively, how we are going to move ahead together as a community that cares about wildlife and wild spaces. It's an us, not a us versus them.
And there's not enough of us to have these infighting and this us versus them mentality because we already have
Mhm.
a dedicated population percentage that is always going to come out against what we do, no matter what. And we just can't afford to infight and have this bickering. And
Agreed.
I've enjoyed this conversation. I've taken much more of your time than I anticipated, and I appreciate it. Please tell the audience, and especially our policymakers that are tuned in, if they want to learn more about this, where can they go to find the great resources you all provide, the studies, the marketing plans, and everything? You guys got a great bunch of resources. And want folks to be able to find.
Thank you so much for that opportunity and for the plug. Listen, if you're a practitioner that works in this field, come to the National R3 Symposium. We host it every single year. And it's a gathering of practitioners and best practices around how we do this work. The other thing that you can do is come to our website, cahss.org, cast.org. And from there, you can find all of our research, all of our studies, all of our case studies. We release those every couple of weeks on best practices in our community. You can find more information out about current and past and future R3 symposia and get connected to all of your local R3 practitioners as well. You can find our direct contact information if you ever want to reach out for collaboration or brainstorming or strategic planning around R3. And and I hope you will.
Yeah, that's great. Take advantage of the website. There's a lot of free information there, a lot of good resources, and the direct access to folks like Tanai is a great resource in and of itself. I thank you for your time. Keep up the great work. Where is the symposium in 26?
We'll be in the devastatingly wonderful Des Moines, Iowa. They'll be hosting us. And if you didn't know, they've got a new kayaking trail through downtown now that we look forward to being close to and really neat Midwestern city. So come on out.
Very good. We'll leave it there. We're gonna welcome in Courtney Braunns next from the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Got a lot of celebrating things to talk about there, but we're gonna talk about things at the state level and exactly what you're just talking about, the practitioners there in your own backyard. So we'll tee her up here in a minute. But again, thank you, Tanaya, for your time and all that you do at the council, and we'll definitely see you down the road.
Fred, can't thank you enough for the time here today. And thanks for all the listeners who gave us the time as well.
Great conversation. All right, we'll see you.
Take
All
care.
right, thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.
All right, folks. So, as I said at the top, want to have kind of a complete picture here for this show, and when we're talking about R3, so we've got the national look, what we're kind of looking at as far as strategy, but now I want to take it on the ground and let's go to a more uh, well, I say hands-on approach, but, like, Pennsylvania is a great example of what's going on and a real, pulse check on hunting and then what they've experienced over the decades as far as hunting participation numbers, things like that, and off the heels of the governor there in Pennsylvania just signing, Sunday hunting into law, that's gonna present a more interesting, recruitment, carrot, if you will, there in Pennsylvania. So, all that and a little bit more here as we welcome in Courtney Braunns, the hunting and trapping R3 specialist for the PGC down there in Pennsylvania. Courtney, welcome. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to start talking about, some of the challenges and, this will be a running theme through the show is that over the last 3 years, we are seeing a trend. We covered this at the R3 symposium in Portland, Maine this year, and responsive management put out their findings, and so that 3 year decline is alarming. Of folks in our space and policy and recruitment, what you do are having to look at things a little different. Back in 2017, when the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports was established, that was the whole point, right? Is to not be so static, not just be in a box, but how do we start strategizing? So fast forward 8 years, and we're seeing 3 years of this decline. What is your team in Pennsylvania and I guess PGC as a whole, um, doing? What have you been doing in the last couple of years to address the challenges specifically in Pennsylvania? And then what is Sunday hunting going to do for those?
Yeah, so one of our biggest challenges we're seeing right now, I think is scalability. So, we have a whole state to cover, but there's only so much time, so many staff, and so much resources to be able to do that. So, we're looking at what we can do to make our programs more scalable and really help take them to the next level. And so we're really looking at partnerships and ways to collaborate. Back in April, we held our first statewide R3 summit. So we brought all of our stakeholders in from all of our NGOs and partners in the state. We heard about their challenges, we swapped ideas, and from that, we've developed a statewide R3 committee. So right now, we're meeting virtually once a month, and then we're going to try to factor in-person meetings quarterly in different parts of the state to work through some of those ideas and figure out how we can collaborate and ultimately create partnerships to make our programs more scalable. We've also launched some new initiatives in the past year. We have learnhunting.org, which, if you're not familiar, is a mentorship program or mentorship platform, I should say, where mentors can sign up, mentees can sign up and state what they're looking to learn to hunt, and it'll help pair them together in their local area to get them fulfilled. We also launched a Learn to Hunt guide that basically breaks down a curriculum for we have deer archery, deer rifle, turkey, pheasant, waterfowl. People can take that and basically run with it and have everything laid out to host their own Learn to Hunt programs.
What are you referenced, your stakeholders coming together and then bringing their challenges to the table. Can you speak to any of those challenges? Or are there common themes throughout these organizations within Pennsylvania, or were they just kind of all over the map?
Mentor recruitment, volunteer recruitment is a really big one. Finding people who are willing to donate their time. Um, it's kind of the same issue with hunters. That older generation is aging
Hmm.
out, but a lot of our mentors are also that older
Right.
generation. So we're looking at ways to work with colleges and recruit younger audiences to come in and help mentor. Funding is another one. Just having the ability, the funding available to host more programs.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You bring up working through the college system, and some of the different organizations have their NGO chapters, and certainly, we aren't out of that either. We just stood up Penn State, collegiate, men and women's, sportsmen and women coalition there in Penn State, which is really exciting, and, giving those folks exposure to all of it, more so on the policy side, but getting a more rounded understanding of how this all works, of how, anglers and fishermen, hunters and trappers and recreational shooters contribute to the funding system, and as you guys at PGC are 100% sustained by those licensed dollars matched at the federal level via PR. Um, so it's really important that folks are getting that story when they go out and understanding the self feeding system that's there. I guess you know one of the bigger quandaries for me is the things you listed out are certainly challenges, but how are you getting people to get to that point to know they need mentorship? They need X, Y, and Z to get in the field in the first place. I think that's the thing is that marketing quotient and letting people know this is even a thing you can go out and do. There's so many people that aren't even aware. There in Pennsylvania, the other thing I would say is access to land. So much of it is held in private, and unlike where I live, you got to get that permission, and there's a lot of you know clubs and leases and all this stuff that makes it hard. So hit them in order if you would. Talk about your air finger quote marketing campaign, how we're getting those people that have no background in this and don't even know they're interested yet, and then get to the land access.
Yes, we're doing a lot of work in urban areas right now. That's kind of one of our target audiences are the people in urban areas who might not have the opportunity to go out hunting because of land access or other barriers. So, I think our most successful hunt program right now takes place in Philadelphia. we have a partnership with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to do 4 mentored hunts at John Hines Wildlife Refuge, right by the Philadelphia airport. And then we also do 2 hunts at Benjamin Rush State Park with DCNR in the Philly area. So we're really trying to target those audiences within a close proximity to those parks. We do an application period during the summer. We're targeting them via Facebook. We have some educators in those areas who are helping us put out flyers and talk to people at other events, whether it's archery events, fishing events. We have people that are setting up at grocery stores in that area to talk to people that might not know that this is an opportunity that's available for them to obtain their own meat. So really the boots on the ground marketing has really helped us. That program's been in place for a few years now and we're seeing it grow every year. Um, you mentioned land
Yeah.
access. So that is a huge barrier in these urban areas. Um, so we're trying to work through that as well and provide as many additional opportunities as we can. My counterpart, Evan, right now, he's working on some third step hunt opportunities. So I guess to back up, we have our initial mentored hunts, and then we have a second step mentored hunt where we can allow people who have participated previously to come back in and basically hunt a little bit more independently, but still have a mentor with them. And then these third step opportunities, Evan's working with local park systems to open up their land to allow these people to come in and hunt by themselves.
Is there any sort of incentive there in Pennsylvania for landowners to open their land? So, for example, up here where I live, there are in current use laws, different levels, and basically people with large tracts of land that don't post their land and allow it for public access to outdoor recreate, whatever that looks like, to include hunting and fishing, they get a significant tax break on their property taxes, and we got high property taxes. Is there anything like that in Pennsylvania? Are you working with your landowners to establish those relationships and create some sort of incentivized program?
So we do currently have a hunter access program. There's about 13,000 private parcels enrolled in that, about 2 million acres. We did just recently hire a position that is going to revamp that program. I'm not 100% sure what that's going to look like. Um, but that is something
The
that
fact
they're
that it's
working on.
being talked about and kicked around and people are trying to put meat on those bones, I think is incredibly important. And again, getting back to one of these biggest challenges in your job is that access. It's a huge barrier for entry. And you think about people like in Philadelphia. And if you, a buddy of mine, Cliff Cadet, known for years, he's out of there in Queens. He's got this great platform. He's been doing a really good job of just being an ambassador to archery and the sporting community there in New York City. And but when Cliff and I first started talking, he one of his biggest things was, dude, I gotta get on the metro, the subway, whatever you want to call it, get on there for 45 minutes before I can even get out of the city. And then, I got all my gear, I'm dressed in camo, never mind the social uh weirdness on a subway of some dude getting on there with a weapon and all camoed up, right? But then just to get there. So that by itself, in them urban areas is super hard to overcome.
Absolutely.
Are there resources beyond the mentorship program, those few lots that you guys are doing these applicant hunts on, either through private donations or the department itself trying to figure out to get more people afield? Is that even an option?
As far as like access,
Right. Well, just physically getting people to those places.
yeah. So you're you mean like in terms of transportation or
Yeah, yeah, or guiding them, "Here's the best way to get here," and, some people just don't know. I mean, we have, like, 15-minute cities, and people never leave their block in an urban setting because everything is right there. Schools, grocery, post, all of it's there. They really don't have to leave. Um
Yeah.
It makes it, a big challenge to get out there into the wilds.
Yeah, that's like you said, we try and when we're recruiting, we try to focus on those areas right around these blocks of land to make it easier for people to get there. We've seen people take Uber and even take their deer home in the back of an Uber. Uh, some people ride bikes. We had a kid actually take his deer home on his bike. Um, so we don't have any transportation options available through the agency. But like I said, we try to open up opportunities as close to in their neighborhoods as we possibly can.
No, that's great, and certainly, like, the thought there and the questioning isn't putting the onus on PGC specifically or any agency, like, we gotta go get vans and buses and things like that, but, through those mentorship programs, I wonder if there's ways that, your volunteers can do that or help with that. It's a huge grind, it's a big commitment, and, certainly, with volunteerism not being what it used to be and aging out, um it's tough, which leads me and segues into another point I wanted to bring up about this, and I'm curious in Pennsylvania is because of the boomer crowd, if you will, the 65 and over, uh, aging out, biology takes over and people cease to exist. There's not a lot of that generation didn't wanna share a lot of information. I think I think your late Gen Xers and millenniums on down are willing to share information. There's a whole lot of information transfer via technology and just all everything at your fingertips. And now with AI, you could get onto Grok, you could get onto Chat GPT and like, hey, what are the hunting laws for this in Pennsylvania? And like 3 seconds or less, you all of that's there. Now, of course, you should ask if you're using that for citations, because the law enforcement's not gonna say, well, because you asked Chat GPT, you're good. You gotta verify this stuff. But all that to say, there's a lot of information sharing, so it's not as like tight-lipped as it used to be. However, people aren't as willing to take people out and share their space that they have, especially in any of these states where you're challenged for access, um, which has led to this. It's a very vocal, I think, minority of our community, but coming out against R3 efforts because of access issues and the crowding of public lands or the spot burning. I'm doing the air finger quotes again. That people think is out there on the social media platforms and people outing these great places to go hunt that they're everyone's land. We just had the big dust up on the hill about public lands and the reconciliation package out there in the West, and that got stripped. So I don't think we can have it both ways, but I'm very curious, you as an R3 professional, what are you guys doing to address that and kinda tamp down that sentiment?
Yeah, so we're fortunate in Pennsylvania. We have over 4 million acres of public hunting land between state game lands, state parks, national forests, state forests. So we have a lot of opportunities for public access in addition to the 13,000 parcels of hunter access land I talked about. So with that, um, I think a lot of people sometimes don't fully understand what R3 is. It goes beyond just getting new hunters out there and just making those license sales. It's about general agency awareness and getting people to understand different wildlife management techniques. Back to the locavore movement, knowing where our food comes from. So I think it's getting people to understand that it's so much more. And even through like these mentored hunts, if we take somebody out and they decide that maybe hunting isn't for them, we're still gaining advocates for the sport, right? We're gaining people that are going to understand why it's important. So it's just trying to frame it that way is the biggest thing for us.
To combat some of that, I don't think you guys there in Pennsylvania have it, correct me if I'm wrong, but a hunter ed or some sort of hunting curriculum in the 12 or under in the school system, primarily public schools, and exposing kids to this, just letting them know it's an option and not even proactively saying you need to get a gun or a bow in your hand and come out into the wilds, but educating them on how the entire system works, how wildlife management is funded, sportsmen and women's place in the North American model. What is the North American model of wildlife management? Why? What's the history of it? Why is it the envy of the entire planet? I maintain that if we integrated a curriculum like that at the physical science level, say the freshman to sophomore high school years, especially when I think kids can reconcile that a little more and have a more mature mind to that, I think we start changing minds at the very least, but certainly piquing interest in the availability to that. And I'm bringing this up too because with the major victory of rescinding the antiquated laws on Sunday hunting in Pennsylvania, one of the last vestiges of that restriction, outside of Maine and Massachusetts that have, last 2 with complete prohibitions, that's gonna allow for some interest and allow for some opportunity, especially when Governor Shapiro, uh, kinda, I think, put a low key challenge out there that Pennsylvania is number 2, in hunting numbers, only to Texas, and he very much would like to be number 1. So I think stands to reason we have a very strong hunting tradition, specifically in Pennsylvania, an active sportsman's caucus that just knocked it out of the park this session, and we're continuing to do some things. Um, and you got a governor in the governor's office at the executive level that is very interested in supporting and being number 1. Thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has the potential to provide a ton of additional opportunities, especially for school kids, college students, working adults. It doubles their hunt time on the weekends. So I'm definitely excited to see what that's going to do for R3, how that's going to allow us to expand our programs in the future. I think it's definitely going to open up the potential to have some new mentored programs and maybe even be able to extend our mentored programs to expose people even more to hunting and, why we do what we do.
So another tool here, that we have employed is language and policy on that works towards, college student license fees. This is often in the R3 space, age demo that's identified as one of the challenges for retention. Kid leaves home, starts doing his or her undergrad, and they're cash strapped. They're spending money on books, paying their loans off, possibly rent, feeding themselves, gas, whatever it is, and a hunting or fishing license start falling way down on the list of priorities. So what they may have done at their home in Arkansas, now they've relocated to Penn State. Uh, I mean, it's one of the cheaper, I think, non-resident licenses in the country, but it's still a cost. I know right now in Pennsylvania, we are working, a bill, I think, I know, to implement such policy, in Pennsylvania. But I gotta imagine that can bear a ton of fruit should that get passed, and we hope it does, to help the college age students that targeted demo, so they can appreciate the resident fee since they are living in that state, they are contributing to the local economy. Um, that's certainly a big tool and would help.
Absolutely. We have a lot of ag and environmental schools in PA, and there's definitely non resident students that I think will take advantage of that should it become available to them. And my counterpart, Evan, is specifically working on focusing some programs towards college age students. He has a Learn to Shoot program coming up next April at Scotia Range that he's going to specifically target Penn State students. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to work within the colleges to expand.
Yeah, um, I guess right now, like, of established programs, for folks living in Pennsylvania, since we're talking about Pennsylvania centric on this part of the show, what are some resources? Where can people go to find out more information, college age and otherwise, I guess?
Yeah, if you visit the Pennsylvania Game Commission website, we have a tab that is titled Get Started Hunting. All of our mentored hunt all of our mentored hunt and trapping opportunities live under that tab. So currently we have a lot of stuff in Philadelphia area. We're working on expanding to the Pittsburgh area next year. And there's a lot of smaller, like, one-day opportunities throughout the state as well.
That's great. A lot of this conversation tends to get really dominated by hunting access, the mentorship behind hunting, and I think because it's just harder to get into, it's gear centric, and there's much more to learn. On the other flip side, again, which I want to acknowledge and give its due to, angling is not as cumbersome to get in. It's far more accessible, especially for your urban um, targets and folks living in concrete jungles, if you will. Still gotta buy a fishing license, still contributes to the American system, of conservation funding. Um, we're celebrating the 75th anniversary this year of the, Sport Fish Restoration Act, through Dinkle Johnson. So here's another mechanism that pays and self-feeds and goes right back in. Now, I know you're separate entities at PGC and the boat commission there, but are there R3 efforts for something more accessible like fishing, and how has that been going, there in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so the Fish and Boat Commission has a variety of programs as well that they put on their R3 end. All of those can be found on their website as well. But I think you bring up a very valid point there. People forget that fishing and shooting sports are also R3. And um not to change gears, but like you look at shooting sports, that's funding a large majority of our PR
Most of
dollars.
it, yep, keep going, I
Yep.
don't you go on this tangent, I like it.
Yeah, so when it comes to shooting sports, that's something we're trying to focus on a little bit more too. So our southeast region last year held their very first Learn to Shoot
Mm.
program, and basically they took one of our state game land ranges and just created a bunch of stations. There's sporting clays, shotguns, rifles, air pistols, all of these things people can come in and try. We did it again this year, very well received by the public. Like I said, Evan's looking to expand that to State College next year. So I think that's going to be a growing initiative we have.
Yeah, and it again, underscoring, how what the funding does through PR, part of that is investing in public ranges, and again, that's another overlooked thing. If you're not in the rec shooting community, that's a thing, we have to have those, that's part of the deal. Uh, Not to put you on the spot with this, and I didn't prep you, but do you know roughly about how many public ranges, Pennsylvania enjoys?
Not right
Ish?
off the top of
Well,
my
I gotta
head. I
imagine
don't.
there's one in probably every county, would that make sense?
Pretty
Yeah.
close. Give me a second. I can get you that
Yeah,
number.
sure, we can hang on. Love getting the numbers out. While you're looking that up, and again, sorry for putting you on the spot,
No, you're good.
I think, you know, the fact that you guys have the ability to bring the gear, bring the ammo, I'm not sure if there's a small cost associated with these or if it's open for free just to get people to get out there and do a little fanfare, but, again, that may appeal to other people's sensibilities more than, than hunting and killing an animal and, going through the rigmarole of the entire hunt. So the hunt doesn't obviously end when you pull the trigger or let that arrow fly. There's a lot of fun work. We should be using that language. It's not work as a negative. It's okay. Now we did this. We got to go through, clean the animal, get it out, start breaking it down into its yummy pieces. And whether you're a person that brings it home and does it yourself or even to the butcher, but recreational shooting, you show up and just, you start target plinking, shooting reactionary targets. That's a whole lot of fun. And not as energy centric.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there is no fee to those events. They're open to anyone from the public. Just we do a registration when they get there, but anyone can show up free of charge and give it a try.
Um, Go ahead. I felt like you were having something else to say there.
Yeah, so I just looked it up. We have 31 public ranges that the Game Commission manages, and then we have more than 800 private clubs and ranges across the state.
No doubt. And I imagine at the PGC website, people can find the locations of those and how to get in contact with some of those clubs, no doubt. And find those, great resources there to get started. And probably could join a mailing list. So when you guys do have those alerts that go out for these very special events, that people would get that.
Yep. So we have a where to hunt tab on the website, and under that there's a shooting range tab that actually has a map they can pull up, see what's in their area. see what they can shoot at that range, whether it's just rifles or rifle, shotgun, pistol. All of that's on there. And then, yes, we do collect email addresses at a lot of our events, and we do email blasts with all of our upcoming events multiple times a year
Yeah,
as they come
that's
out.
great. If you don't, you only know what you know, and if you don't know things are happening, then you don't know that that opportunity is there, for you. So look, great things happening in Pennsylvania specifically. I'm glad we got a chance to talk specifics in Pennsylvania, what you guys are doing. Again, going back to Portland earlier this year, it was really cool to see so many different state agency folks come together. The collaboration, the sidebar conversations that were being had. Um, between you guys, other R3 professionals, cast staff, what's going on, and quite frankly, the acknowledgement of things need to change, not just pumping everybody's tires, if you will, and singing into an echo chamber of "We're all good, we're all good." No, and not everything is good, and we need to adjust as a community, not just as R3 professionals, but you guys messaging that down to the NGOs that are out there, your in-state partners, people that manufacture gear, like we got a message change. We gotta look at this in a different way to invite more people in, speak to their sensibilities, and shift. And we started out talking about not being static and not being held into very strict parameters, and adjusting our messaging to maximize the opportunities.
Absolutely. And I think that's something a lot of people don't see is like there is no silver bullet to R3, right? Um, we're trying to take someone who's brand new, who may have never had any exposure to the outdoors, and turn them into a lifelong hunter is the end goal. And that doesn't happen overnight. And it doesn't happen in a one
No.
day, it doesn't happen in a 3-day hunt. So we're really trying to make sure that we push on the multiple exposures and make sure that as they move out of that like awareness, interest, trial phase and decide to continue, that they have that support. Because if that support's not available, whether it's through their local NGOs or sportsmen's clubs, mentors, whatever it may be, if that's not available, they're not going to continue.
Well, look, you're doing a great job. You guys collectively as a team and the agency are doing a great job. And I'll be interested to check back in talking with Director Smith last week on the very fresh heels of that Sunday hunting rollback. What this looks like in the next 2 to 3 seasons, what that looks like for hunting license sales and more people coming into the fold. If it happens, I think it would, because you're obviously doubling the opportunity on the weekend for most working folks. But I suspect there's gonna be a positive bump there, and it would be a nice thing to show these other states, with these restrictions, and of course, what you guys specifically have going on in Pennsylvania, can be emulated in other states that may not be doing that or have the same challenges. So the collaboration between y'all is important, and, it's a nationwide, um initiative, obviously. Courtney, it's been fun to watch your career. We go back to both of our NWTF days, me as a staff member, you as a very active volunteer there in Pennsylvania, and taking your passion and bringing it to the PGC and doing great things, and um, continued success there. And it was a great pleasure to have you on our program.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to see how things develop over the next couple years and what new initiatives and things come out of that. So
No doubt. Well, we got a lot of good things to look forward to, and especially this hunting season because that went into effect right away. So, the good people in Pennsylvania and traveling hunters will have their time maximized over those weekends. Courtney, great to catch up with you. Appreciate your time, and thanks for your professional input on this program.
thank you. Take care.
All right. All right, again, my thanks to Courtney and Taniya for their time. Now, locally, it's a great pleasure to welcome in Greg Kretschmar, who I told you guys at the top of the show, Greg in the Morning Buzz, regional show here in New England, but have a massive audience, not just terrestrially, but now through streaming. Literally, I don't think I'm exaggerating. Millions of people hear your show daily, plus the after the show podcast that people can get to. And that's all relevant for where we're going to go with this segment of the show with Greg and what they do on their show, talking about the shooting sports and hunting through their platform. But first, Welcome, Greg. Appreciate you carving out the time, and yeah, just stoked to have you.
Hey, psyched to be here, man. How you doing?
I'm well. I'm well. It's hot as hell in New
I know.
Hampshire. I'm done. I'm ready for September and October to get back in the woods myself. Although you're always in the woods, and I think that's a cool part of this conversation too. Is you use the outdoors in a different way. In my opinion, a professional photographer. I don't know if you give yourself that title, but definitely. Well, you sell your pictures. You're a professional, so we'll put it
I
that way.
yeah, it's something I struggled with, but, my accountant says, "Yeah." Which is nice, but you're right, I love being in the outdoors, whether it's the woods or along the ocean. That's really where I find kind of my peace. Like so many people that go out and hunt and enjoy the outdoors, I just do it a little bit differently, you
Yeah,
know?
and that's like the biggest point to this conversation that when we're talking about R3 as a philosophy and engaging with
Mhm.
the general public, is that not everyone uses it the same way hunters do, or even recreational shooters do, going to a range and having a good time. But it's we all use the resource in a different way, and how that resource is funded through local dollars, through license sales matched at the federal level through Pittman Robinson. We've talked about that. Now, you even referenced it on the show this morning. Your support of hunting, don't take advantage, don't do it. Also, you guys like to shoot. We have Sig Sauer here locally, great partners of ours at Congressional Sportsman Foundation. You
Ours as
and
well.
yes, yours as
Ours
well
as
on the
well.
show. Yeah, and you guys
Yeah,
get to go over to the Experience Center and do
yeah.
events and take advantage of that. And direct shooting's a lot of fun. So, as you may know, through the sale of firearms, ammunition, archery equipment, your brother's a big archer, I've observed. All of those come with an excise tax at the manufacturer level that the sporting community almost 90 years ago asked to be levied upon them so we could pay for conservation, pay for the maintenance of the habitat so that all that's put on the back of a small population, but everybody gets to use it because of how that self feeding system works. So getting people out there shooting, hunting, buying those licenses to get that federal match is vitally important. You've had exposure to it, so you're not completely, like, immune to this idea. Again, I referenced your brother who does go out. You came out a handful of years ago when I was working with the Wild Turkey Federation, and I did a celebrity turkey hunt, and you were cool and down with that, and you went out and, had a listener that bid on that for some fundraising for you guys and
Mhm.
immersed yourself in that. Hell, Governor Sununu and you came out to an all day learn to turkey hunt 101. And the
Right.
governor is a past Governor Sportsman's Caucus chair for us too. So it was
Sure.
really all this to say the support is there, even though you don't do it. Talk a little bit about your upbringing and um, just the exposure you've had and where you are today with all of it.
Well, yeah, I did grow up in a hunting family. My brother hunted and my dad did hunt for a period of time as well. So I've always been, exposed to it. And I've loved, like I said, I love being in the outdoors. I've gone hunting, with my brother as kind of like you know, I asked, I'm like, hey, I'd go with you. I'd love to go with you sometime. I just, I don't know as though I want to be, you know, I'm not I don't know if I wanna be hunting myself. I'm like, "Look, I'm a gun owner. I know how to use firearms. I fully support firearm usage, safe, firearm usage, as you know, and I fully support the hunting community." And the funny thing is when I was listening to you talk, I thought it's so strange to think that I think that people who don't get it, people who don't may not wanna support the hunting, community, I wish they realized that the hunters are the ones that care the most, about that, about conservation, about wildlife management and how important wildlife management is. I mean, I recognize that, and I've recognized that forever. Um, and it's such a great experience being outdoors, for me. Even though I may not hunt, I know I think I feel like I know what hunters get from it. You know what I mean? Although I get mine doing the same thing with the camera, but I mean, I've had moments, in the wild, and that you don't have to go 3 miles into, nothing to find wildlife. I mean, I've had wildlife encounters with bear and moose and deer and foxes and things, and those moments they're precious. to me, like to be out there and be in their turf and respecting that animal's turf. Now, I'm a guy that I don't want to disturb wildlife. I want to watch it. I want to watch it as it happens. And that to me is such a beautiful experience. Now, some people may go, well, why do you support hunting? Well, I support hunting because wildlife management is taken very seriously by law enforcement officials. And it needs to be maintained, it needs to be monitored. You need to make sure that the overpopulation doesn't, kill off. There's a million things. I mean, tick issues with moose, and protecting the deer population. And I mean, how many times are deer getting hit by cars? That would only be worse if you've ever been out to Michigan, where deer overrun the place and there's deer along the side of it's always been this thing where we've got to support that. And I found some of the most responsible people that care the most about wildlife are the ones that actually hunt, and fish. And so I've always kind of found that, to go hand in hand. And even though I don't, go out hunting all the time, I have been out, and it's a thrill. When that animal comes in near you. When I was hunting with my brother, we were up in a tree stand, um, and we were in two trees that were like, 4 or 5 feet away. And in the quiet of this October afternoon or whatever month it was in the fall. It was so beautiful because I heard the deer coming from behind, but I couldn't turn around. I had to wait. And so, you hear the crack, and you hear the step, and you hear the step. And I could see them out of the corner of my eye. There was more than one. And and so my brother's in the other tree, and I'm looking at him, and it's starting to get dark. And it's getting to that point where, he's got a decision to make, right? And my brother is a very ethical and law-abiding hunter. He always has been. And next thing you know, there's 6 deer in front of us that go out into this little clearing standing in front of us. And then you hear them hitting their antlers, which
Oh, no,
is a
no
is
way.
a
Very,
really rare thing.
yeah.
And my brother's like, afterwards it got too dark, so we hung up his bow and we watched, and that to me, I'm like, it's great. I don't have to carry a deer out of the woods. you know? But when you see that kind of thing, boy, oh boy, it kind of changes you. It kind of changes you and gets you on the inside. And it's a beautiful experience. And I kind of from that I get, why hunters like being in the outside, you know? Um, and I just try to promote that, by talking about it on the radio and being open about it. I mean, we live our whole lives pretty much on the air, but that's why we have such a great relationship with Fish and Game. I want people to know. I want people to know that the people involved in hunting care, the people that are involved in fishing care, whether it's in a lake or the ocean. You know, they're the ones that care the most. Law-abiding outdoors men and women care the most. That's what I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, no, and I think you're right. I I don't think others do care too, right? It's just how we're using and consuming the outdoors, right? Some of us literally consume it, and others
Right, right,
by the lens or just by
right.
immersion into it. You referenced New Hampshire fishing game. I want to get to that here in a second, but before I do that, and it might lead better into this. You have exposure to it, but you work with people and you're in communications. Oh, as I was saying before that little gremlin got in there, working in communications the way you do for 35 plus years, you've virtually heard, seen it all, dealt with the public in a really diverse area of the country. In your opinion, because of that, what do we get wrong? I'm really good about beating up our own and letting our community know like what I think we get wrong, social media wise, how we talk about shooting experiences, the vernacular and the verbiage we use. But that's always talking into an echo chamber. And the other way, conversely, like yeah, we all beat our chest and we can get each other going. Like yeah, we do this, we do that, and but the people on the outside, that 80%, and a lot of them that you get to talk to, or they get to hear your voice every day. From your perspective, what do you think the hunting and shooting sports community could do better as we're engaging the general public?
Boy, that's a really good question. And, I I I can I think that the most of what I see is is very positive. You know what I mean? Welcoming, try a safety class. Look at, I mean, when kids, fish for free, or kids can go out and hunt with their mom or with their dad or whatever, and they go out and they get taught, safe firearms, usage, safe boating. All of those things are the positive things I see. And Fred, I think that there's, like in anything, right? You've got that small minority of people that are irresponsible,
Hmm.
you know? I mean, and unfortunately, that's what gets tagged. That's what people tend to concentrate on. And it's frustrating because we have a nasty habit in this country of looking at the bad and ignoring the good, even though the good far outweighs the bad. I mean, same thing with politics. Let's talk about what we don't agree on instead of all the things we have in common. It's a weird thing about us. We can't embrace what we share. We embrace what we don't.
Yeah.
And somehow, if I don't share the same experience as you, your experience is wrong. And it drives me nuts. I wish I had an answer for you as to what you could do better. Promoting safety is one thing, but also maybe, I don't know, promoting the beauty of it.
Mm.
Like, and that's hard to promote unless you've seen it, and you've been out there. Like, you know, I have friends that are not hunters, and they know that I favor it and favor outdoors things, and they're very reasonable about it. Like, they
Mhm.
understand. I'm like, look, I talk about wildlife management and how
Yeah.
important it is, and how different life would be for us if it wasn't maintained. Like I talked about how many deer would be running in the yard or running in front of your vehicle that you swerved because you don't want to hit it, and then you get in an accident. So I don't know, maybe stressing how wildlife management can help save some of our lives and save their lives as well. I mean, we may be hunting a population of deer to keep the numbers manageable, but in doing so, we're not only saving the deer population, we're also saving human lives as well. I don't know if that's the correct answer, but
No, I don't think there
it's a
is a
hard
correct
question.
answer. It's really just
Yeah,
I'm more interested in your perspective. We had some studies we talked about earlier in the show about perception of hunting, and when you start using certain words, up at the top is this whole locavore movement that's been around for probably the better part of a decade now. Like, people dig and understand sourcing your own meat, your own protein, and they're down with that.
sure.
So you go to the bottom of that chart, you start saying trophy hunting and start using aggressive language like that. People are like, "Out. I'm out. I got nothing to do with it." Even if you eat that critter and you label it a trophy, they're done with it.
Well, social media is, to me, for all the great and wonderful things it could do, it's part of the slow death, I think, of society as we know it. And you could see it. Like, look at hunting season. You go out and you encounter a deer. Maybe during bear season you get a bear, or even a moose, right? And what are you going to do? You're going to take a photo of it. I know I would,
Mhm.
because I'd be proud of it. Look what I did. I hunted this animal. I'm going to harvest this animal. And I would do that. But yet you put it on social media, and all of a sudden every voice is as loud as the next,
That's right.
right? And whether it's right or wrong, the peoples can sit there. I posted a picture of a coyote that I took. The coyotes, I know that they can be a nuisance type of animal, but man, they're beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, they can be beautiful animals, right? And I posted this picture, and I wasn't even hunting it. And somebody said, like, I'd put a bullet between its eyes. You know,
Naturally. Right, right.
that doesn't help.
That
You know what I
doesn't. You're
mean?
exactly
That does
right.
not help. And then below that are the 20 people who go, "How could you, blah, blah, blah." And I wrote to the guy, I'm like, "I know what you're saying. But, when you say that, you're only inflaming the people that are against it." You know? Thinking it and writing it are two different things. But those are the kind of things that I think we need to see less of. I just don't know how to go about that.
Yeah, no, and the self-policing, we don't have the answer either on the inside of the community. We certainly try. You try to
Yeah.
do it short of shaming people, right? Because you don't wanna be like bullies, but also like,
Mhm.
hey, what you're doing and how that small minority, like you said, are representing the whole, you become a de facto ambassador, and you suck
Us
at
and
it,
them.
and we don't
Us
want
and them.
you to do it. Yeah.
Right. You're exactly right. Us and them. Yep.
So this is a great segue into how I wanted to finish our segment here in the final minutes, and again, I really appreciate your time. what you guys do on Greg in the Morning Buzz every now and again, what is it like every 6 or so weeks? It really pumps up at the beginning of different hunting seasons.
Actually, it is about 6 weeks.
Okay,
Look, you
so
pay attention, brother. All right.
I'm on it. So you guys, for a number of years, have hosted a conservation officer into the studio from New Hampshire Fish and Game, and just field questions. People text, people call in, and the reception of that, and the involvement from your audience, this megawatt audience from all over the region, I think they overwhelm you guys. You can't get to all the questions, and then the CEOs can't possibly answer all the questions. It's a long segment. You guys really more than most. And I found that to be an interesting wrinkle in how the community hunting, shooting sports is represented and normalized. You guys normalize that, and I know that's not the intention. It's more of a Q&A and just a fun session. People really tune in. The underlying thing there is people are who don't do it are generally curious or have law enforcement questions. And it's a fantastic model. Not ripping off Greg in the Morning Buzz, but personally, I think it'd be a great model for others with a platform like you, with an audience like you have, could
I
do
am
a
gonna
whole good with.
I am gonna correct you.
Oh,
All
please.
right. I am gonna correct you. Normalizing it is the intent. You know what I mean? Normalizing is the intent. And and the reason is because I always want the show to be a reflection of us, right? Laura is an outdoor person. Roadkill is not.
Like he did come
um
on turkey hunt with us.
Yeah, that's right, he did. But I wanted to say, look, so many I look at everything, I look at our show as I want it to be like I'm hanging out with my friends, and I wanna talk about the things that my friends and I, would talk about. And I have so many friends, and I mean, probably maybe at least a majority of my friends are either firearms people that love to, work safely with firearms or hunt or fish. And I wanted to have somebody in, regularly. We started with Graham Courtney, and now Cole Letourneau comes in, and they're so good at it. You know what I mean? And I wanted to normalize and let them explain and let them hear from somebody who is out there all the time, and I want them to hear you know, um, how regular they sound, how normal it is for people to enjoy the outdoors and, and hunt or fish and do it safely. And one of the things that comes out the most, I think that we do that is something that you wouldn't think would come from it, and that's compassion. In whether they're describing stopping somebody for doing something, fishing without a license or hunting without a license or some sort of safety violation, it's not like haul you off to jail. It's not. It's like they try to teach. Everything is a teachable moment. Yeah, sure, there may be penalties, but they're really good about sort of normalizing it and humanizing
Mm.
what they do. And you're right. I mean, the response we get is overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And that does two things. Proves that I was right, which is always good because it doesn't happen a lot. But no, but it proves that, it proves that what I think what I think about our audience is accurate and that they're interested. Even and there's so many times that I've gotten emails and texts when they say, "Look, I don't hunt, but I love this segment because I learned so much about animal behavior, about how to prepare yourself for animal behavior." I mean, not only are we talking about hunting and fishing, we're talking about avoiding a problem with a bear or what to do type of things if you're even not a hunter and you encounter wildlife. And those are beneficial to everybody. So it's a we try to educate the audience, we try to have fun, and I try to normalize the whole outdoor experience because we live in such a beautiful part of the country where the top 3 states, Maine, Massachusetts, I mean, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, hunting is a big thing. And I like being an outlet where we talk about things that apply to people's lives that listen to the show. I honestly, if everybody did it, it wouldn't bother me a bit. Wouldn't bother if every radio station did it, wouldn't bother me a bit because in the end, who wins? We all do. So, rip me off, whatever.
Um, and it's
You won't
such
do it
a
better than us, though.
no, no, I
It's a
would agree
cocky
with that. I got a
just
bias
that
too.
was a little attitude I'm in there, come on.
Punk that flag.
You know what I mean, though,
Yeah, for sure. The top 3 states in New England are, I mean, the population is so diverse,
Yeah,
from political persuasions to the crunchiness in Vermont. I feel like we're kinda right in the middle, and then you get Maine, and then Maine is
yep.
Maine, right? Different parts of it, so and they're all lovely, but and that's kind of the whole point, like with conservation, and that's our mantra. It is nonpartisan, and there's no RDs or in betweens on this. We all like beautiful wild places, clean water, clean air, healthy populations. So you take all the ancillary crap out of it, and we can all, I think, mostly agree on this.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Especially here where we live. It's
I
just
like
hard
to
with
be
water.
where people aren't.
Yeah, yeah, right. That's
You
exactly
know,
right.
I got like the whole thing about with photography and me, which is kind of my thing. Um, that was born out of it actually kind of just became a therapy for me. Like being out there by myself is a therapy for me. Sometimes I
Mhm.
go with a buddy or something like that. And I know that hunting is the same way. Fishing is the same way. It becomes a therapy, a needed part of something that gives you something in here that you don't get anywhere else. And
No, it's
that's a
quiet.
beautiful thing. Yeah.
Our
Beautiful
gray
thing.
matter needs that disconnect for
Yep.
whatever the hours it is, but
Mhm.
it's necessary for human survival, truly. I don't mean
Information is being, yeah, thrown at you a billion times a minute, and put the phone away and go out into the woods and hunt or hike or just be whatever. Um, yeah, you can't get that. That's the best feeling in the world. So,
Greg, I really appreciate your time going a couple minutes over here. And one last thing, if I may take the liberty to make a recommendation for that spot, and that is, next time you have the CEO come in, I would love to hear them in brief talk about the Pittman Robinson Act and what that does. I referenced it at the top of our conversation. How the license sales at New Hampshire Fish and Game get matched to that self feeding uh, federal fund, and those funds get dispersed and help bring mission delivery for the state agencies, help fund hunter ed, help fund public shooting ranges because that's the deal with Pittman Robinson. You got to have public shooting ranges so people can go out there and plink targets and train safely. Because again, that all those ammo, firearm sales, and accoutrement are a self feeding system, which is
right.
phenomenal. You're not
Hmm.
paying those taxes unless you
Right.
buy that stuff. So I think it would be a great story for them to tell, and I think they do so enthusiastically.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do that.
Cool. Greg,
Awesome.
great to see you. I really
You too,
appreciate it.
buddy.
Hope to do it again. I'll talk to you soon.
You got it, buddy. Thanks, Fred.
All right, my thanks to all three of my guests, Tanaya, Courtney, and Greg. Great contributions from all. And I think, excuse me, I think what I set out to do with this show, I think we achieved that. Getting those different perspectives um, from folks in their own experiences. Obviously, with Tanaya working for CAS, totally immersed in it, doing it every day at a national level, working with practitioners in every state, working with the NGOs and coming up with new ideas on engagement, um, getting outside of our comfort zones, not talking in the echo chamber, all of that. And, at her level, she's really seeing it all. And then we get down to Courtney and get where what she's doing and what the folks at PGC are doing and the programs they have to offer and the goal setting they have and what they're trying to achieve. And, certainly on the heels of Pennsylvania rolling back Sunday hunting um, prohibitions. Great tool in the toolbox for those R3 folks in Pennsylvania. Now, I'm half the weekend is now the whole weekend now. They got the half of it back is open to them, so that should encourage some folks to come out and participate. And then getting to Greg, man, I appreciate everybody and especially Greg because I know how busy he is, planning that show, commitments he has after the show, just all of it. And I super appreciative for his 20 or so minutes there. And his shared experience and being told that I loved learning that. I didn't realize that that segment that they do with New Hampshire Fish and Game was purposeful to normalize things. I think that's great. I love that. I love being corrected on the spot for that. That's a happy correction. I was under the impression it was, because when this kind of started, I believe that Northwood's Law, the Animal Planet show, when it was at its peak, they did Maine, And then they came next door to New Hampshire, and the New Hampshire one just like lit fire. People love love tuning in to see what the New Hampshire conservation officers are doing throughout our state. And I think somewhere around that time is when this segment started coming in. And I love that Greg wanted to make that purposefully motivated to normalize what we do. And you hear that. You heard that in the conversation. Just the questions they get, the quality of questions they get, the amount of questions they get. So being able to replicate that, if you're a R3 practitioner professional, you're hearing this show. Um, Here's an idea. Now you remember who started it, so you always give credit where it's due and plant that flag here in New Hampshire with Greg and the Morning Buzz. But there is something to that, and it shouldn't be relegated. I don't mean to say this because people in the radio space might take offense, and I'm not being offensive. I'm just being real. I you get these segments, but they're more echo chamber. They're relegated to a AM dial, um, you know, AM side of the house or some really, really low number on the dial that you might be able to pick up from the 25-mile radius, right? So, like, the fact that this particular show, with the reach and the audience that it has, there are those shows in other markets throughout the country. You get somebody else doing this, that's pretty powerful, and, being able to talk about what we do on a frequency like that, that does normalize things, and, I love that he said humanizes it because, yeah, that this is a very human act, what we do out there and the management and dealing with law enforcement, and it's not all this memery that is created, one about law our conservation officers and law enforcement. They're not all these Mr. Green Jeans, whatever the hell the meme is out there. Like most of these guys and gals just want to teach and educate. I mean, if you're really screwing up, you're gonna get tagged, but it's not like they're looking to screw people over. Um and then us that go out there and participate and do all of this for the love of it, and it's not that FUD memery that I referenced with Taniya earlier. So anyway, at the risk of rambling here on this out, I don't want to go over too long on this, but really nice to have the different perspectives on this from the different levels, and that's what I set out to do with this particular show, and I believe we achieved that. So certainly, you got the contacts from Tanaya, PGC. Um, And if you're interested in listening to Greg in the Morning Buzz and you're not in the New England area, iHeartMedia, you can dial them up. Greg in the Morning Buzz, call letters or WHEB. So it's an awesome show. You should just tune in anyway, but especially when they have those conservation officers in and get a flavor for what that is. And yeah, you are 3 professionals. You listen to the radio too, so if there's one in your neck of the woods, might be worth, tuning in, see what they do here in New Hampshire, and, replicate it because it's a powerful reach. Alright, we're gonna put it there, leave it there, that's the show. Um, General housekeeping as always, go to congressionalsportsman.org, congressionalsportsman.org, congressionalsportsman.org. There are all the free resources. Sign up for the Sportsman's Voice newsletter every Monday. That comes out about around 5 p.m. Eastern time, unless there's a holiday, and then it gets same time on Tuesday. Follow along with that as you listen every Wednesday to our weekly news roundup. And then the track in the Capitals. Pretty quiet most of the country with sessions being out, but once we ramp up, you want to follow bills and certain legislation. Free service right there. Get the updates as they come. And then all of our issues as per usual. We're updating those every year with emerging issues and tailoring those as things change. So again, more free resources for you to self educate and strengthen arguments and when you're trying to advocate as a committee member, as a legislator, as the Joe public, and you go to testify on behalf of your fishing game club or just yourself and your family. So there's lots of good stuff. So be sure to check it out. Our event season is fast approaching, so make sure you're checking in on that between our the banquet, all the prompts to make sure you're signing up for our events. If you do attend, especially the legislators, registration is now available for those that attend, agency folks, partners, and legislators. Early bird registration is available until September 1st. Get on that now. We will see you in Memphis. Got a great lineup of stuff going on. So spend pre-Christmas with us for about a week in Memphis, Tennessee. All right, we'll leave it there. We will see you guys next Wednesday for the roundup, and then a couple Thursdays from now, we'll bring you another feature. Be safe out there, and we'll do it all again. As always, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. So long. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.